In this video today, we're going to continue to build on some ideas about writing body paragraphs for a Section 4 essay or case study response. And in particular today, we're going to use the alarm matrix, which some of you might have seen in class, and it's just going to help you to build on that idea of writing a long response. So today we're going to think about this idea of alarm and some ideas in respect to that. But also the main purpose of using alarm is to allow you to answer the question in the depth or as deeply as it requires. And that's really based on that directive verb. Commonly, as we saw in the previous video in business studies, it's evaluate, it might be assess, but often we need to make some sort of judgment. And the idea of alarm is to help you to make that judgment, because often the difference between a good and excellent response is whether or not you've really met the requirements of the question in terms of answering to the depth required. So this is, it should say 2012. This is the one we've looked at previously, the 2012 question. We looked at the exemplar response, where I shrunk it right down. You could see the whole response, which was 6.5 pages from memory. This was that question. So how can different sources of funds help a business achieve its financial objectives? So we're going to look at this question to help us understand our matrix. As you remember from the previous video as well, we look at these descriptive verbs. Now, how is the one we're looking at today, but more commonly you see things like evaluate and assess, which are really all about making a judgment. And that's a critical thing that we're going to do with alarm, making that judgment. And there you go. So alarm is going to help you to make that judgment. And that's what separates the good from the very good responses. This was previewed at the end of the previous video, and this is our matrix. Some of you might have seen similar in class. I know my class, when we looked at the sources of finance, we used something similar to try and evaluate which source of finance to use and when we would use it. And so this is a really good way to both learn, but then also to use it to respond to the question and answer the question. In terms of this particular question, you can see that the syllabus topic is finance, and the subtopics are the sources of funds and the objectives. And the question is there as well. How can different sources of funds help a business achieve its financial objectives? So keep that in mind as we look at just one paragraph from that exemplar response. So I've just included one paragraph. Now that's handwritten and a little bit messy. So what I'm actually going to do, I've retyped it. So in the following clips, this is that same response, but it's now typed, and I've just color coded it. So on our alarm matrix, we've got the red, which is identify, and that's basically just the key theoretical content. But we also want to mention the relevant case study. In this case, Woolworths, and you can see the last word there highlighted in red, so they correspond, is Woolworths. But we're just identifying those key words, things like debt financing. Okay, debt financing is a source of funds. When we then go, maybe it's a short-term source of funds, I think that's starting to explain what it is. So I've highlighted that in orange. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. It's just a way of thinking about it. But then I've gone back to red, so such as overdrafts, commercial bills, factoring. They're just identifying the various things. The second sentence here actually sets up this essay. Remember, this is just a snapshot from an essay. This sets up the essay for what's to come. A large part of this essay, because it's sources of funds, a large part of this essay looks at debt financing. In this paragraph, it looks more at the short term. The following paragraph, which I've not got for you, but the following paragraph looks at long term. So we then have that second paragraph still building, and you can see we're identifying more. We're identifying a mortgage, a debenture, and an unsecured note. Finally, we identify Woolworths. As we move on, the next bit I've said is in yellow, and I think it's good in this instance that it's not all sort of linear. It doesn't go red, orange, yellow, green, blue, but it sort of jumps back and forth a bit, which is fine. You need to use this system or this idea to help you and not to sort of hold you back. Don't be held back by it. Use it to remind you the sorts of things that should be in an essay and a paragraph, and loosely the order, but as you can see, we do change the order a little bit. So here with analyze, basically we want to just make that link or that relationship between the theory, which is the short-term source of funds, in this case an overdraft, and we want to link it to the case study. So this sentence reads, Woolworths financial advisor Tom Pocket is fond of utilising overdrafts. And all we've done with that little snapshot is to analyse, is to make that relationship really clear. We then step back into more orange, and the orange and the yellow don't really stand out. So I apologise for that. But we step back into some orange, which is more explain and the characteristics. We're describing what an overdraft is. So they're fairly secure, where the bank provides extra money in an account to spend, which may be repaid at a set time. It will be repaid at a set time. Okay, that's sort of a bit of a definition. So we've just explained what an overdraft is. The next bit, and this is the critical bit, and I'm glad it's really large, is because it's the most important. And it's the bit where we're then critically analysing, or we're really looking at the positives and the negatives of an overdraft, specifically with evidence from the case study. So if we read, this is, however, fairly risky, as overdrafts may become quite large sums of money, and the business has to repay this to the bank. We can see that that's a possible negative aspect. Okay, it's risky. So we're identifying, we're looking at a negative. We then talk about the business, and we say that Woolworths monitors this source of funding as it is used as a bit of extra financing to buy groceries and vegetables, which is then repaid as the stock is sold, which is a reliable source of funds. So we've sort of, a reliable source of income. We've said it's a risk, but this is what Woolworths do to get around that risk. They use overdrafts. They know overdrafts do have negatives, and they've addressed that. You can see also, it's not perfect. This paragraph is a good paragraph, it's well structured. This essay got 20 out of 20 in the HSC, but it's by no means perfect. For example, groceries should be IES. For example, used as a bit of extra financing, I would describe that as colloquial or informal. We can write much better than that. So yeah, it's a very good response, but I want to point out that it's not perfect, and it doesn't have to be perfect to get really good marks. What it does have to do is really answer the question and analyze. Look at the detail. Look at the good points and or the bad points of this, and in this case, how Woolworths get around that. The last bit where we're going to wrap up this paragraph is the blue, and that's basically assessing, evaluating, concluding. It's really, okay, therefore, fulfilling the objective, and that links back, this links back to the question, you know, the objective of remaining liquid. Liquidity is a goal or an objective. Okay, so one of our objectives, that's answering the question, to cover repayments as well as profitability. That's another objective, as the overdraft never exceeds $200,000 per week. It is repaid each week. Okay, and so we can see the way that particular paragraph has done all those elements, and I've color coded it to try and make it clear. It's completed all those elements of the alarm matrix, and it's just a way of thinking about, okay, have I done this? Have I done this? And in particular, making sure you're really focusing on those green and blue areas. You're evaluating, you're judging. You're saying, okay, it's got some negatives. This is how they get around it. Therefore, it fulfills the objective. And that's really important. So that's back to our alarm matrix. And you can see I've just taken from the coloured rows, and that's what we're looking at. In terms of what you're doing now, your task is to write a paragraph. So you might think about the alarm matrix. And this is your new question. So evaluate the importance of financial management strategies in improving business performance. This system might help you to answer this question in a more detailed way, to make sure that you really do evaluate the importance of those financial management strategies. Not just describing those financial management strategies or explaining what they are, but really getting to the heart of the question, which is saying basically, how good are they? Are they helpful? Do they lead to improved business performance, or do they not? And that is that critical analysis, that evaluate, that assess. That's the higher order thinking, and that's where you get the big marks. So that's the end of today's video. You now need to have a look and complete an essay or a paragraph for your teacher and submit that by the due date. Thank you. Good luck.